20 years ago this week, 10 countries joined the European Union. And while it wasn't the first expansion of the bloc, it marks one of the most significant to date. It's interesting to look back on this now, considering the current tensions over Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. Deutsche Welle correspondent Lars Halter joins us now from Berlin. Lars, g'day. So take us back to 2004 and tell us, why was the EU's Eastern expansion such a big deal?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, that was simply because of who joined the European Union back then. Because, historically, the EU was a Western economic powerhouse. It was founded by Germany, France, Italy and the Benelux countries, all, of course, NATO members, all Western allies. And now in 2004, the bloc took in a number of countries that until just a few years earlier had been members of the Warsaw Pact or were even Soviet republics like the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. They were the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Poland became a member then, as did Hungary, and that, of course, has given EU leaders some headaches ever since, for sure. Now, the addition of these countries to the EU was a strong signal towards the Eastern powers, mostly, of course, Moscow, that politics in Europe would look different in the future. It was a political game changer, but it was also an amazing business and economic opportunity for so many. With the expansion, previous EU members suddenly had new markets in the East, and they found it a lot easier to produce goods in regions there where labor was a lot cheaper.
And so, talking about those economic opportunities, have these new admissions caught up to their EU partners over the years?
Well, not entirely, but we can clearly say that those countries saw a boom for their respective economies. Many companies in those Eastern countries quickly partnered up, forming joint ventures with Western companies to work for and sell goods to the West. Today, 2 decades now after that expansion, the economy in many of those Eastern countries has really improved tremendously. There is more wealth, albeit they've not yet reached the level of Western economies in terms of wages or some other parameters. That's also reflected in the fact that all the countries who joined during that Eastern expansion are still net recipients. To date, that means every year they are getting more financial aid from the EU than they are contributing to the bloc. So for them, membership in the EU has been worth billions, most of which was actually spent on infrastructure improvements, but also on agriculture or education.
And of course, we've got the Ukraine situation now, keen to join the EU. Where does that stand?
Well, it's a complicated situation. The EU and the Ukraine have long been talking. They've long had a free trade agreement too. And yet membership in the EU is usually achieved in a decades-long process. While there was talk over that on and off, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has requested immediate admission under what he calls a new special procedure. Brussels has signaled that they would indeed be open to fast-tracking approval. And the latest now we heard is that Ukraine could be admitted as part of a class of countries that also would, for example, include some others that used to be Yugoslavia. Now, acceptance for Ukraine to join the EU is relatively high here within the bloc, but between politics and the economy, of course, there is a lot that has to be cleared up, and that's very tricky to do, especially right now at times of war.
OK, Lars Halter there in Berlin.